Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to week 3, part 1. And today we're going to talk about defining and measuring crime. And in part 1, we're going to be introducing you to the concept of trying to define what a crime actually is. And does our definition of crime capture every act of harm? So we're also going to discuss that not all punishments relate to crime. Okay, so what is crime? Defining crime. Who decides what is a crime? How are offences and punishments created? How do we measure crime? And what are some of the sources of data, and are there limitations? Because there are. But have a think about crime. I saw a photo the other day of where men's fashion is going. And honestly, I looked at it and thought, well, that's a crime against fashion. They were wearing pants that looked like nappies. It was really, really weird. And then we have things that some of us think are socially unacceptable, such as facial tattoos. So a lot of people think that facial tattoos are really unacceptable and should be made a crime. But is that necessarily so? So a crime refers to a broad list of activities which are deemed to be against the criminal law. So it is a wrong punishable by the state. The Macquarie Dictionary refers to it as an act injurious to public welfare, with a punishment prescribed by the law imposed by judicial proceedings. It's a serious violation, a serious wrongdoing, a sin, or any offence. So they're the common themes. They're the three: causing public harm, forbidden by law, punishable by law. But it must have a prescribed punishment to be a crime in what's called the Criminal Code. And that's something that you'll look at in quite a bit of more depth with Greg in police courts and criminal law. So I'm not going to go into that an awful lot here. So crime can be defined in really different ways. So you've got your typical crimes that you'll think of and the stuff that you see on TV, such as murder, armed robbery, and drug trafficking. But it also includes other things that people don't think about so much. So tax evasion, fraud, and environmental crime. Things like toxic waste in waterways, that is criminal. So they too are crimes. And victimless crimes, so-called victimless crimes. But is prostitution always a victimless crime? Think about the fact that a married man might sleep with a prostitute and catch a sexually transmitted disease and then go and give that to his wife. Does that act of paying for sex then become a victimless crime? So when we study crime, we're going to study all of these elements. But first of all, we have to discuss, do criminal laws capture every act of harm? Well, no, they don't. And here is a really, really good example. So a pregnant woman consumes large amounts of alcohol and she risks inflicting serious harm on her baby. So that's called alcohol fetal syndrome. Children that suffer from this are usually quite badly cognitively impaired. They show really, really poor decision-making skills, and they can be very, very aggressive. If you look it up on YouTube, for instance, you'll find a lot of videos about kids that have been born like this. And it really is very, very debilitating for a child to be born to an alcoholic mother. But that's not a crime. A pregnant woman can use drugs. It's illegal for her to use drugs, but it's not doubly illegal if she does so while pregnant. And again, if you want to see something that is really scary and actually may frighten you, see if you can find some footage of a drug-addicted baby, born drug-addicted, and the hospital staff and the nurses working to try and clean this baby up and get them unaddicted. They just scream and scream and scream and they go rigid. It is really very quite distressing to see this. But in and of itself, it is not illegal for her to be doing the drugs while pregnant any more than when she's not pregnant. Assisted suicide. There's no public harm really done, but you are technically killing them, so it could be still seen to be murder. Which is more harmful, murdering someone or assisting someone to die if that's what they want to do? Now, this law has recently changed in Victoria, so there is some legality for assisted suicide in Victoria. but they have some really, really strict rules down there. You must be terminally ill and have fewer than 6 months to live, and that pushes out to 1 year to live if you have multiple sclerosis or motor neurone disease. There are residency requirements, so you can't move from somewhere else in Australia to Victoria to participate in this, and there are multiple doctor assessments that have to be done. But the problem is they don't take into account variations across time and place. There's been a lot of changes in social tolerance for things such as domestic violence. It used to be quite acceptable. Now it simply is not acceptable. Adultery, in some places it's very acceptable. Some people here would probably consider it to be quite acceptable. Many others would not. Homosexuality used to be illegal. Now it's not only, it used to be illegal. It is now not only legal, but homosexuals can legally marry. Okay, so we have to differentiate between what is an act of crime and what is just deviance. So drinking while pregnant would be considered to be deviant. Smoking, whether you're pregnant or not, is now considered quite deviant because we know how harmful it is. So socially, we do not agree with it. Sorry if you're a smoker. Facial tattoos, really, really bad hair. Oh my God, the mullets. Aren't the mullets just fantastic? Not. All right, so crime is defined differently from country to country. So a good example of this is steroids. So steroids are legal in countries like Thailand, but illegal in Australia. Have a thought for a sec for why you think that might be. Okay, I can tell you it's because Thailand is really not a very big country on the world sporting stage, and they don't have a big sporting industry with elite sports people like we do in Australia. And they have got much more pressing issues to deal with over there, such as poverty. Adultery is still considered to be a sin by many, but it is not a crime. Where could it be considered a crime? Well, think of Middle Eastern countries, ultra-conservative Islamic societies with Sharia law. In Saudi Arabia, if a woman is caught having sex with a man and one of them is married, but it's adulterous, she can be stoned to death in public, and the public can all join in the stoning. But unfortunately, the men don't seem to get punished at all. So there is still a very, very big inequality there. Not all punishments can relate to crime. So they can be civil, where people sue each other, and it's to get money as a compensation, as it were. It can occur after criminal proceedings or in the absence of criminal recourse. So that means that nobody has been actually charged with committing a crime, but they have done a wrong, so they are sued. Things like regulatory penalties, loss of licence for points for traffic offences all come under this heading. But we've also got harm-based definitions of crime that are increasingly popular, and these are activities that violate human rights. So it covers a broad range of behaviours, a lot of workplace injuries, and we see a lot of workplace injuries, unfortunately, where people get hurt or even killed. We had one at the Gold Coast just last week, I think it was, where a fellow fell down a lift shaft and he was there for several hours before somebody heard him and found him. So that was a workplace injury. And some of that can be negligence by employers where they're trying to cut costs and cut corners as well. And they can be ordered to pay significant fines for breaches of safety laws. But again, this is not criminal action, this is civil action. Now, I'd like you to watch the video about the young lady up in the top right-hand corner. I'm sure you're all familiar with her. She was burnt very badly doing a big long-distance run, and the settlement in court was due to the company that ran this run not protecting the runners enough, but it wasn't criminal. But she was really, really harmed, as was the other young lady that you're going to see in the video. She's now married to the young man in the video who stuck by her, a fine young man, and they have 2 sons together. I'm not going to play it here because I can't have videos that I can't have tapings of my lectures that are over 15 minutes, and that'll take it well over. If you go to that YouTube clip, it's a 60 minutes episode and it gives you a lot of background, but it's part 1. There is a part 2 there. I would really highly recommend you watch both of them all the way through together. They only go for about 15 minutes, but it gives you a really, really good background to this. So you can stop now and go and watch that and then come back. Okay, so what are some of the issues around harm? Well, we have to balance the interests of people to be protected from harm with their right to freedom of speech and the rights and liberties of individuals, including privacy. Nowhere at the moment is this more evident than in America, where we've got so much violence going on by people's right to freedom of speech and liberty not being respected by other people who, I'm sure you've all seen cars being attacked with baseball bats and people dragged out of cars and assaulted. So it's really, really ugly over there. And this is this whole thing about the rights of people to be protected from harm. These conceptions of human rights will vary across time and place, and it doesn't really help us to understand the criminalisation process, but it is a very big part of our life, especially at the moment. Now, this photo here was taken in Charlottesville, where a group of white supremacists on a uni campus were protesting. There were counter-protests from the students, and one of the supremacists drove his car into people and ran them down. So this highlighted that there was a right to protest versus the right not to be harmed. We're seeing this we saw this a little bit at the University of Queensland last year, where there was a group who were arguing for Hong Kong and a group who were pro-China came in, and there were a few fists flown. So that right to protest needs to be protected for all sides of the argument. And if everyone could just do that, then there'd be no fighting. It'd be fantastic. If you want to protest, you protest, as long as you stay 1.5 meters apart, I suppose. Okay, so that ends part one because you've got those 2 videos in there. In part 2, we're going to move on to trying to define crime. And we're going to discuss some of the more contemporary laws that have come into being. And we're also going to discuss civil law. So see you in part 2.